So, hi everybody, and welcome to episode. I'm not quite sure where we're at actually with Level Up. Episode 245. It's a lot of episodes, really, isn't it? Today of Level Up, 60 minutes, of course, of live Q&A, where your questions really do drive the show. Today, we're going to have a conversation about why big data is so important to everybody, its relevance, and in particular, its relevance to our professional careers in 2024. If you are watching on YouTube, then you can find out so much more, of course, about what we do in our channel. So do please take a moment to give this video a like and subscribe to find out everything really that we're all about. Blanche today is over in the social chat. So do please let her know your name and of course the city from where you're joining. She's going to post some links in to vote up the questions that you would most like answered by the panel. And of course for you to be able to add your own as well. If your question is selected, then your name's going to appear in the credits at the end of the show. So do get those questions in early and stay with us to see all of that happening. So let's jump in straight away and meet our expert panel. Jasbir Kooner is returned today. She is, of course, Director for Cybersecurity at the Englobe Corporation, where she's really spearheading their journey into AI. From a career in technology and business, Jasbir works closely across the supply chain to engender a spirit of collaboration and support. Welcome back to Level Up, Jasbir.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's great to be here with everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Rejoining today is Jeroen Geurtsen. He is, of course, a product management director over at Accenture in the Netherlands, where he offers and manages training sessions for consultants aiming to enhance their overall business capability and growth across a wide range of leading practice. Jeroen really focuses on enabling others now to achieve their full potential. Welcome back to Level Up, Jeroen.
Thanks very much. And I very much like the big data as well and consume it. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Sachin Melwani rejoins today. He's, of course, a project systems and business transformation consultant who combines a deep knowledge of product development life cycles and methods. His background is solidly in IT, so I think big data is really at the heart of his practice, and he approaches change with a desire to help his clients adopt the latest technologies and make the most of them. Sachin, welcome back.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Jan-Willem Middelburg rejoins today. He's, of course, the CEO of Cybiant, who are based over in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. He's a serial author, and his latest book, The Enterprise Big Data Framework, led him to pioneer the professionalization of automation in big data. So he's a frequent keynote speaker and a community contributor to so many different communities around the world, many of which I follow personally as well. Welcome back to Level Up, Jan-Willem. Great to see you.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks so much for the lovely introduction. This is a topic at which I can talk all day, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Mart Rovers completes our on-screen expert panel. He is, of course, the president at INTERPROM and a regular contributor here on Level Up. Across the US and indeed Europe, INTERPROM deliver a range of coaching, advisory and training services to their clients, leveraging emerging and leading practice to give their customers a competitive edge. Welcome back, Mart. Lovely to see you today.
Great to be back, Nick. Thanks for having me. I think we have an answer to the question why big data is important, and that's basically the all-out answer after these answers were done, because Edward Deming, he once said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data."
See, that's really good. I'd love to see that on a banknote. Maybe that should be on a Bitcoin. Perhaps I'm a bit outdated there by talking about a banknote. Maybe that should be etched into every byte, okay, within a Bitcoin. Now I'm talking off topic. All right, very good. Our question master for today is Shanice Mitchell-Cox. She's joining us from South Wales. Shanice, unusual to have you in the QM spot on a Friday, but really nice to see. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me as QM today. It's nice to switch around the roles sometimes and appear on Level Up and work with these fantastic experts as usual.
Okay, well, very good. Well, look, in which case, let's jump straight into it if we can. I know we've got lots of questions on this topic. And if you're working in sales or you're joining us as somebody that's in the delivery side of your organization, I'm sure that there's going to be relevant content for everybody in our audience today. So, Shanice, start us off with the first question to the panel.
Of course. Thanks, Nick. So we've got a question from Simon Bell in Philadelphia. What makes big data management different from traditional data management?
Well, that's a good question, really. Thank you, Simon, for submitting it. Panel, what are your thoughts on this? Is there anything which is specific, either in kind of scale or approach or method? Jeroen, your thoughts. Why don't you get us going?
Yeah, if you traditionally already did the proper data management, structured with clear owners, permanent management adaptions, then it will be a small difference. But the data is so intensively growing that you have a lot more to do. You need to do it more structured, and you should also make it the baseline for your artificial intelligence, because that should be further automatically done. Else it will be too heavy for you.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, how it was possible to get into a real mess with your data 30 years ago, and people are still getting into a real mess now with their data. Yeah. But there's an awful lot more of it. So the mess is even bigger, if I can kind of put it that way. So thank you, Jeroen. Great thoughts. Let's go to Mart, and then we'll go to Jasbir.
So I'll give the textbook's answer, if that's okay, just to get us going and get our minds in the right mindset. Data management, it says, it encompasses the processes, the policies, the practices of collecting, storing, organizing processes, and ensuring that the quality and security of the data is taken care of throughout its life cycle. And literally, like what every management effort is all about. But big data, it refers to the massive volume of structured and unstructured data that cannot be easily processed and cannot be easily analyzed and using traditional data management tools. So it's like elevating it to a whole different level.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. I appreciate that. Jasbir, what are your thoughts on this as to the key differences?
For myself, if we just take a step back and we just look at big data and traditional data, right? Traditional data was for traditional businesses. And this is before social media and before we became super connected. So prior to that, if we're looking at a traditional business, maybe you were selling, let's say, a car, right? So you had your customer data, you had your models for the car that you were selling, and that was pretty much it. And when we take a step into where we are today, and let's just take it with one aspect, we have social media, and there's so many platforms. All of a sudden, you have that new data coming in. And like Mart said, they're structured. Before, structured data was easier because we were able to put it in our database, our Excel file, keep it very simple. Now we have social media data coming in that could be via audio, via text. So it's unstructured. So this is where you're managing a lot more data. Before it was traditional data was in gigabytes and terabytes. Now we're in petabytes, and I don't even know what the other term is beyond that. So that's where the management becomes a lot more difficult, and where with traditional data, you were able to manage it with an Excel document, and you didn't need the skill set. When you're looking into big data now, the skill set changes and what you're going to do with it changes.
You're absolutely right. It was interesting this morning how some social platforms remind you of events that have happened in the past. And one of those such reminders today for me on my feed was something that happened 4 years ago. And of course, 4 years ago, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. And at that time, in the rush to be able to keep people safe, Excel was used as a recording mechanism for kind of writing down who had been vaccinated in the UK. And at a point, it ran out of rows. And you're sort of thinking to yourself, okay, well, had somebody thought about that, let's just do the maths for a minute. Right? How many people? 65 million people. All right. It's probably not quite got enough rows to be able to cope with that. But there we are. the kind of content, I agree with you, video content, audio content, and so on, we are generating such vast amounts of data every day. Jan-Willem, is this something that you see? I mean, you live and work and advise from Southeast Asia, which is really at the heart of the high-tech world. Is the sheer quantity of data beginning to overwhelm organizations in terms of they can generate it, but they don't really quite know what to do with it?
Well, I would say the definite answer to that is yes. For many companies, it's difficult to see the forest for the trees or to see the data for the actual insights. And therefore, I also agree with the rest of the panel is that you will need to apply different kinds of mechanisms. I also like to add one more technical perspective is that if the sheer data that you're collecting and analyzing becomes so large, then you need to start redefining your technical architecture. Even with good processors and computers, at a certain limit, just as you mentioned, your Excel rows, you're going to hit the limits of what is possible in traditional computing and traditional data management. And that's when you need to move to more distributed structures. And for organizations that really want to leverage big data on a more consistent basis, that also requires a different technical setup. So that's, I think, also a major element to address.
Yeah, absolutely right. One of the things that a lot of colleagues on LinkedIn may be interested in is, of course, we're all marketed. We have a huge number of platforms sold to us every day about giving us insight into customers rather prospects. They're not yet customers. And the concept is that the more that you understand that the metadata around all of these folks, the more likely it is that you'll have a meaningful connection with them and so on. So it's kind of at both ends of that bow tie model, if you like, the open end of the prospecting funnel that you're going to then qualify for a particular product or service, and also at the other end to be able to build that loyalty and advocacy as well. The use of data throughout that customer journey, if you like, is super important, isn't it? So thank you very much indeed, panel. Great first question, Simon. Just before we move on to the next question, I would really just give a shout out to those people who are watching online to introduce yourselves, please, and let us know the city from where you're joining. Kath Convery is online again today. Great comment there, Kath. If you're not familiar with this, that actually there's been quite a lot of news recently about a variety of different data sources getting hacked into. I think there was another one actually from with a military story as well. It was a fairly low level database. In terms of secrecy at any rate, but nonetheless, a lot of data being made available and put into the wrong hands, if you like, through that. So a good comment, Kath. Thank you for you joining us online today. On that note, I think we should move on, please, and let's take our next question for the panel. Shanice.
Thanks, Nick. We've actually got another question from Simon Bell in Philadelphia, and he wants to know, where does big data play a vital role in organizations?
All right. Well, if you'd like, it's a good segue into that one, actually. I'd not thought of that. But if you'd like to give us your thoughts, if you think about an organization in terms of perhaps functions or purpose, these sorts of things, whereabouts would you say that big data is going to play a vital role? Mart, why don't you start our thinking?
My immediate answer is always improved decision-making. And that can be in any part of the organization, assuming they have access to, big data and have the tools and the means to do it. But as, common sense prevails, the better the information, the better the decisions. And I think big data has contributed a lot to that for many organizations. That's why we see some organizations being enormously successful these days, simply because they were ahead of so many others, having access to that right information to make these right decisions.
I agree with that. Often, some years ago, you would hear a CEO say, it's their instinct, my gut instinct on this is X, Y, or Z, and at the time I was working for SaaS, the business analytics software. So whenever anybody said that, everybody inwardly groaned. It's like, oh, I'm sure that you want some evidence to support that, just to help you out a little bit. So every time we heard that, it was like a kind of the pre-sales consultants would rub their hands with glee, I think, a little bit. Sachin, why don't you come next with your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Jeroen.
Sure. I didn't quite really understand this question, because my understanding of big data is that what we're trying to do is create a data lake where we're getting many different parts of the organization to collaborate around data. So it's not like traditional data management where you have silos of data. What we're driving for is to have a common data lake, and then to then use association rules to say, okay, well, we know our customers, for example, buy this type of product. Depending on that, can we identify other trends which can help other parts of the organization? So for me, I didn't kind of agree with the question. Sorry.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Thank you very much indeed, Sachin. Jeroen, your thoughts, please. Then we'll hear from Jasbir.
Yeah, I fully agree with Mart that it's very important for the decision making. But in your organization, you have many different processes, customer related, supplier related, production related, etc. But I would say on the top priority for me is the finance as well. Am I sending the right money for the right working products delivered to the right supplier? And I had practical fraud situations at customers that with the proper data management, you should eliminate.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. And Jasbir?
I remember when I first started as a data analyst, and there were specific departments that we thought, all right, sales, we could increase our revenue by X amount. So sales needed data. Then finance needed data because they're the numbers department. And right now, there is no department in an organization that will not lead data. Every department needs data now, and every department wants to be led by data. So I would say for a vital role, every department, you just need to figure it out by your organization on how they'll need that data. And where does it play a big role? It would be you get better decision making. It could be in real time because data is coming in all the time. You get better customer insights. So you're able to give them a better experience so that they're returning customers, which is the hardest customer to get. Getting a customer to walk into a store one time is the easy part. Getting them to return again and again is the hard part. So this is where when you're data driven and you're making predictive decisions, you could help the customer be able to do that. Then from a risk management aspect is like working in cyber, it helps with your risk. And there's better operational efficiency. So you're able to really save on budgeting in that aspect. And last, I would say, is the innovation aspect, where a lot of times we don't view data as innovation. So if you're using data properly, it could really help with your competitive advantage and set you apart from the rest of the market.
I so agree with that. And there's a real quote. If there's one takeaway from today, everybody, it's exactly what Jasbir has just said. This can give you a competitive edge, believe you me. And if you're unsure about how to go about doing that, then reach out to any of the folks on the panel and they'll be able to help you with that. And Mart, you wanted to come back in.
Just quickly, and Jasbir did a fantastic job on taking a very broad look at where there's so many benefits that can come with big data. And so forgive me for repeating a few first things, but to capture it, increased innovation is definitely one of them because of big data, and better customer experience or improved risk management, becoming more efficient in all what you do, operations. And last but not least, continuous intelligence is another one. But again, I'm capturing what was already mentioned by Jeroen and Jasbir.
Thank you so much. No, thank you, Mart. It's very helpful. That's really great. I guess one of the things as well about having the data is that you can then nuance your automations a little further and provide that kind of customer intimacy, if I can use that end of the spectrum, that maybe that's eluded you previously if you're harvesting this kind of nuanced information. Jan-Willem, you've done a lot of work on helping organizations to automate, looking at getting value back from the sea of data that they're managing. Is that something that, as Jasbir says, can truly deliver competitive advantage in your experience?
Well, I would say absolutely. And I fully agree with what Jasbir is saying in terms of making sure that data can get you towards that competitive advantage. If you have two organizations that sell exactly the same product or same service, and one takes more data-driven decisions than the other, then long-term, the data-driven organization is always going to outperform the organization that takes just decisions by gut feeling. And if we elevate that one step further and use that data to build workflows, automations, RPA solutions that can then also take decisions based on that better insight, more targeted marketing emails, better supply forecast, better looks at who's going to order exams, then you will always outperform a company that doesn't. So you get into I would say, a reinforcing cycle. The more data you have, the better decisions you're going to be able to make, the more business you're going to get, the more data you collect, and the cycle goes on.
Thank you very much indeed. We might return to that robotic process automation element dimension a little later. Thank you so much, Jan-Willem. Let's jump over to social then. Let's see who's online today and do some welcomes. Peter, brilliant to have you joining from the very beautiful state of Ontario in Canada. So great to have you along. I'm imagining, Peter, your weather is better than it is in Montreal. As Jasbir was telling us, it was all a little bit wet just right at this moment. So great to have you online anyway. And we also have Madan, who is joining from Hyderabad in India. Brilliant to have you online today, Madan, and lovely to see your contributions popping up in the chat as well, which is excellent. So let's move on then, if we can, and we'll take our next question for the panel, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Neil. What are the risks of managing, maintaining, and securing large amounts of data in organizations?
Well, it's getting scarier, I have to say, Neil. So it's a really relevant question to be able to ask. Your consultants are often out there in the field. They're pushing the envelope. They're helping their clients innovate. How do you keep them and the clients safe in terms of data security, data governance, and so on? Oh, we can't hear you, Jeroen, at the moment.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
For data security, it's always use, the 4I or the 6I principles, that there's not one person changing that. That's also when, for a customer or supplier, the bank details need to be changed. No, that's not, the sales can do that. That must be done with finance as well, because you definitely want to have all those data very, very good. And yeah, of course, on securing the large amount of data, I hope that everyone knows that hacking is always happening everywhere. So you better have the multi-factor authentication and the good encryption of data when necessary.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. APMG, we're very fortunate. We work with a number of organisations who specialise in this area. One of them is the City of London Police in the UK, who are the national policing lead on areas such as this, cybersecurity and so on. And they have a very active anti-fraud, unit within them. But, their work still, even though they're working with large multinational organisations, sometimes the vulnerability arrives at a very human level. It's not the technology so much, it's the people who kind of almost open the door and they're trying to be helpful. They kind of open the door and let people in. So I love your answer there about making sure that there's more than one person in that approval chain, or that another somebody just looking at the problem and thinking, is this real or is this?
Yeah, you can do all those. Right. Yeah, you can do those things for your own security yourself as well. I have more than 10,000 IP addresses that want to have contact with me blocked, based on the content, what comes there, because you already know it's fraud or phishing.
Incredible, isn't it? It's incredible how this is all evolving for us. So much. I might come back to that in a moment for some of the practical things that we as individuals might be able to adopt. But before we do that, let's hear from Mart, and then we'll go to Sachin.
So one of the key risks of managing this data, this big data, is that what most organizations are struggling with these days is they know they're sitting on vast amounts of data. And yes, you can buy the right tools and make sure you have the right expertise in-house to start benefiting from it. But how do you ensure it doesn't leak to the rest of the world so it stays within your organization? Because there could be a lot of intellectual property that could be part of that. So as in the ancient old data management world, access to data is, of course, a big one. Who has access to it? And then to what extent is that being shared? And where does it leak potentially to the rest of the world, where the rest of the world is not supposed to know it? So it's the typical information security practices come into play. Of course, this is why it remains important to have information security practices, risk management practice formalized in your organization. So that's one of these responses to this. But again, how do we wall off all this data that we have within our organization and make sure it doesn't, leak to people that are not supposed to have access to it?
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? It's the governance within the organization as well as the external threat that I think is very important. Sachin, what are your thoughts on this? Some key risks about managing, maintaining, and securing.
I think we need to be clear about the regulation which has come out in the last couple of years. So within the UK, you have GDPR, you have the Information Commissioner's Office, which is the watchdog for it, and they're handing out higher and higher fines, whether it be Google or Marriott Hotel, or millions of pounds for data breaches. So there is a real financial risk about it, let alone the commercial kind of risk of losing customer details, losing that future business and that loss of reputation. There are concrete steps that you can do within the organization. So, for example, like what Jeroen was saying, is that you can look at the data processing in terms of who can create a structure, who can release a structure, who can post items within, for example, SAP, and all of that kind of good stuff. But then also things such as having an AI charter, having a GDPR policy, Cyber Essentials certificate, and ISO 27001. So there are corporate policies that you should have in place if you're going to embark on this journey.
Thank you very much indeed. Corporate policy is really super important. Might come back to that in a moment. Jasbir, what are your thoughts on some key risks?
Nick, I'm going to take it old school here. A lot of times we talk about new stuff with security and all these regulations and everything coming. I think sometimes what a lot of companies forget is that hardware failure does occur. And sometimes we just have accidental deletion of data. And not everyone has the right backups. So I know of certain situations that have occurred at companies where they've ended up losing a lot of data due to just the human factor or the hardware factor. So I think that's one thing to always consider. Make sure you have the right backups and you have data available. So you can only secure what you have. So start off with the foundation first. So just wanted to mention that to everyone that's listening today. Sometimes you just have to start back at step one and make sure that the backups are there.
It's absolutely right. And even on a personal level, I think, some years ago, my backup was done to, a thumb drive, or my backup was done to a single external hard disk that was, kind of, you'd unplug it from one laptop and plug it into another one. Now it's network attached storage, because the amount of information is vast in contrast, and you want it to be available and you want that to be going on all of the time. And then you need the second layer that says, where does your NAS get backed up to? Where does that go? And so on and so on. So you're absolutely right to highlight that, Jasbir. I completely agree. What an interesting question. Thank you very much, Neil. I would say that, whether your country legislates at a national level, or whether you're working within a framework of legislation at a state level, or even at a more local level than that, because of the industry that you're in and your industry's regulator, just putting yourself in the shoes of the customer is always a really good idea. Then you can kind of start to figure out, oh, okay, well, if this was me, what would I expect? What would my expectations be? I think sometimes it's easy to wait for the regulator. It's much faster just to do the right thing and, figure out how you build policies that are workable and pragmatic, but at the same time, put your customers at the heart of your decision making. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Some great answers. I'm really enjoying today's discussion. Shanice, I can see quite a lot of activity online as well. Let's take our next question, if we can, to the panel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. We've got another question from Simon Bell in Philadelphia. What is the relationship between big data and artificial intelligence?
Well, it's the kind of thing that you can type in now to OpenAI, and it will probably give you chapter and verse about it, I would imagine. The relationship then between big data, and I suppose in the last couple of years, we've had this explosion in the visibility of artificial intelligence, which may have been previously perhaps hidden, from direct view at any rate. And it's now starting to kind of come to the fore, and, it's a household term, the different systems that people have available to them. Jasbir, if I may, I'm going to come to you first for your thoughts on this. That relationship between big data and AI is clearly, super important. But do you think that it's always one way, or do you think that the growth in AI now is almost fueling this sense of we need to improve our private stores, if you like, of amounts of data, so to give us that competitive edge rather than relying on the open, large models of data which is publicly available?
So for this, Nick, I would start off by saying AI needs data more than data needs AI. So before AI became a household name, data was doing fine on its own. Even with the growing trend of data, data was still, doing what it needs to do. And AI needs to plug into data to really be AI when we think about it. And this is where with OpenAI, ChatGPT, once we got Gen AI started, it was picking up everything on the internet. And we know that everything on the internet is not truth. So we have good data and bad data. And this is where open source and closed source becomes very different when we're looking at AI. So for a company to be able to create an AI model that they want to use and they want to not have hallucinations, they need to make sure the data is good. So your AI will only be as good as your data is, and you need to make sure you test it. So this is where it becomes AI needs data. And right now, when we're looking at AI, I know a lot of the Gen AI models, they're creating their own data. So when we had the first models coming out, they were going online and they were scraping data and getting open source data. And now I believe it is Amazon, the first one that created synthetic data, where we have AI models that are generating its own data. So it's not as biased and it's a better format. And so we're stepping into really a lot of different dimensions.
It's a really fascinating area. I'm hoping that my brain is going to be able to cope following it along and being able to spot, the real and the imagined and the plain hallucinogenic. I mean, in the early iteration, you could spot those hallucinations relatively easily. But I think sometimes if you're a novice in a topic and you end up being informed by an AI engine, you're less in a position to be able to discriminate between fantasy and real information that you can rely upon.
Funny story for you, Nick. So when Gen AI first started, I believe it was in America, there was a morning show and they had this segment with Gen AI and they said, hey, what are the top 2-3 books you would recommend? And the generative tool gave them 3 recommendations, spoke about each book and said how it would be awesome for them to read. It was very, segmented to what they wanted. So after the show ended, they went and they researched and they're like, oh, we want to buy these books. And they didn't exist. So the one thing you have to know is a Gen AI tool will very confidently give you the wrong information. And this is where it's on us to make sure that we know we're double checking everything. So human in the loop when it comes to any AI tool is very important.
Okay, so really, really good point, isn't it? Jeroen, sometimes we are, kind of misled a little bit by the technology. What are your thoughts on this relationship then between data and AI?
Well, I must say that a lot of the aspects was already discussed, but it should be very structured and I would say not only look at the information that you get, but try to look broader and based on that, look at it also from other aspects to see if it's really trustworthy data, because that's the biggest challenge. That's also why I have not much confidence in what we currently have as available AI solutions.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think sometimes, we've already seen those horror stories, haven't we, of a large organization with a very good reputation and they put a very simple chatbot, on their homepage of their website. And within a few weeks, somebody's got the chatbot deciding that actually the organization the chatbot is representing is perhaps not the best in class. These sorts of things are a real reputational risk. Don't run when you've not checked whether or not the steps that you're walking are the correct ones. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Mart, final thoughts on this one?
Nothing a lot to add to this. It's that the AI needs lots of data to be helpful. But then the old saying goes, right? The garbage in, garbage out. And Jasbir gave some fantastic example there. So you want to be really, really careful, like you said, Nick. But AI does have the ability to do the best analysis possible, of the data. But like Jeroen said, we're in the early stages, so we need to be really, really careful.
I agree with that. Human beings also make mistakes, of course. It's not unknown for you to have somebody convincing you to buy something on a false premise. That may have happened to us all in the past. I'm just kind of saying it's not always just software that hallucinates. Okay, sometimes sales colleagues might do it as well. And sometimes we hear actually what we want to hear. And the person introducing us to the service or the product, they never actually said, what we imagine that they said. So there's
Right.
all of this kind of understanding and misunderstanding that happens
Bias.
a great deal. So I agree with that. There's not an audit trail, a full audit trail of every conversation that goes on when you're doing your research to buy a product or a service. But with AI, there generally is. And so we tend to jump on that and say, oh, that's wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you very much indeed. Let's move on, Shanice. I think we've got some live questions stacking up now. So let's take the next one for the panel, please.
We do. Thanks, Nick. So we've received a question from Aaron Singh. How do we convert unstructured data to structured data?
Okay, well, is this a thing? Should we always even, Aaron? I'm going to expand your question a little bit. But I'm going to start off with Jan-Willem. How do we convert unstructured to structured?
Well, the blunt answer is you don't. And let me try to explain it in very layman's terms, because if you look at the formatting for, let's say, video files or text files or PDFs, they're all different. It's like you're in a supermarket and you're comparing apples and bananas and you want to kind of merge them into something similar. So the straightforward answer is you don't, but there is a workaround. And that is through a concept called metadata. So what we do with metadata is that we try to categorize unstructured data through structured elements. So building up on the same example of the apples and the bananas, if you're in a supermarket, you see that they've categorized it. There's a different price. There might be a photo next to it. It might give you where they were grown. So we try to categorize it and we try to give some structure that we can then query and we can sort it in from low price to high price. So there are ways to go around it, but converting unstructured to structured is not a goal in itself. And in most cases, it's also not desirable.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? How sometimes we need to reduce the complexity in order to be able to find the value, if that makes sense. So there's that temptation, isn't there, to produce a taxonomy almost, to classify in some fashion. This behavior means this. How many times have we watched on the television somebody narrating a fantastic natural history program saying, and of course, this shows the way in which, the male attracts the female and so on. And in 10 years' time, we learn from another piece of advancement in the study of those creatures. And it wasn't what they were doing at all. It was something entirely different. So I agree with you. I think, by all means, label, classify, add data, add that metadata, tag, enhance, and so on. But perhaps, a pure conversion, Aaron, with your patients, my friend, we're kind of saying as a panel, you may not wish to do that straight out of the gate, but by all means, come back to us, Aaron, and challenge us a little further, or expand on your question if we've got the angle on the question a little bit wrong. We apologize. Let's move on then, if we can, Shanice, and we'll take our next question, please.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. We've got a live question from Charlotte. Is there a definition of big data? For example, amount or size or volume of data?
It's a good question. Thank you, Charlotte, for asking. This is Charlotte Miller, of course, who is usually in the QM seat. So she's joining and has submitted a question into the panel today. Jasbir, what are your thoughts on this in terms of how big does it need to be before it's big?
So for this, to give Charlotte an answer, traditional data is more viewed in gigabytes and terabytes right now. And once we're talking big data, we're talking about petabytes and exabytes and whatever comes up tomorrow. But I think if we take a step back from this question, big data, depending on the industry you're in, as well as your organization, how big it is, it could be defined differently. So if I'm an organization with 1,000 individuals, I may be thinking I'm using big data, but my definition of big data may be different from Nick's company that has 50,000 people. So that's where anytime I'm speaking about big data with different customers and companies, it's always good to set a definition on it. And then when you're doing a comparison, you could really get, all right, this is how we defined big data. And this is what we're comparing against. So that way you keep it apples to apples and you're not talking about two different things.
Thank you very much indeed. Mart, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Jan-Willem.
Besides the volume of data, velocity of data is another component that makes it big data. And then, but like we said earlier in the show, it's this combination of structured and unstructured and semi-structured data, which has a tendency to grow exponentially. I think that's another element of what makes it big data.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because our operational systems, generate this kind of information at alarming speeds. Yes. Jan-Willem, what are your thoughts on defining this term?
Yeah, I would like to take a slightly different angle here. And I would like to argue that big data is a knowledge domain, first and foremost. And in that knowledge domain, you need knowledge around systems, technology, the databases, obviously, but also algorithms, processes, the human factor. So there's a lot more that comes into play. And big data has grown to be this container term. But it's, in my opinion, about so much more than just the size of a data set. And for an organization to make data work, it's also not just around the size of the data that you're looking at. It's a combination of all those different capabilities combined that ultimately enables you to achieve value from that data set. So I would like to approach that definition slightly different.
Excellent. And I think from all of you, I appreciate it because you've each given, a different dimension for us to kind of consider. And I agree with you, Jan-Willem. It's one of those terms which is used a great deal, but everybody just nods. And it's a bit like the emperor's new clothes. It's like, oh, yeah, we know all about that, but we don't really know all about that. And the best thing to do when you don't really know all about that is to ask someone, and where better to ask it than actually in Level Up twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. So put those questions in that you feel you would like an answer to so that they can actually help you to inform other colleagues, whom you are working with on a day-to-day basis. That would be really great. Thank you very much indeed. Hopefully, Charlotte, that helps you out with your quest for knowledge around big data. Shanice, let's move on and we'll take our next question, please.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. We've got another question from Simon Bell. What are examples of a big data job and what skills do I need to land a big data job?
Well, there's lots of roles actually in this area that you can jump into, and especially relevant for people who are considering a change in direction in their career or more of a portfolio career approach, if you like. Jeroen, what are your thoughts here in terms of, roles and ultimately there may be a full-time job or there may be, a mixture of one or two different roles?
It might be a mixture, but you must look at the various domains. Will it be, you have look at the processes, order to cash. Okay, who will do that in the sales, finance? You must also take into account that it might not only be your relevant data. There are outside things like global requirements. If you ship something across the boundary, then what is there allowed and not allowed. Also, on your skills, identify the ones that use the data and indeed the confidentiality of all that data. So for me, the most important thing is you should understand the business process in the organization, what it does, and what is the crucial data for that. And set up the metadata that you know what are the attributes that are very important there.
Thank you very much indeed. Mart, your thoughts, please.
Some of the roles that typically pop up in this space, data scientists, data and computer engineers and architects, data analysts, data developers, specialists. And the number one skill usually evolves around knowing these programming languages like Python and JavaScript. That's just the one to write the right software and programs, right, to get the right data and get the right information in essence, knowing about machine learning, data mining, predictive analytics, quantitative analysis. These are just a few examples. But as you can tell, it's quite specialized.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Sachin, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so you can look at it purely from a data scientist point of view and talk about big data technologies such as Hadoop, Spark, data visualization tools such as Plotly or Seaborn. But if you look at the whole kind of life cycle of data, insights, decisions, actions, and outcomes, you're talking about a whole value chain. And then you're talking about things such as, for example, if, as other persons mentioned, if you move data across geographical boundaries, you do have Brexit concerns around GDPR, and you have to have assurance about that data. So there are new roles being developed which are not necessarily connected with the data scientist role. The other thing is with AI assistance and LLMs such as ChatGPT, you have everybody's role to some extent will be that of a data scientist or data analyst, because they'll have these AI assistants supporting them.
Thank you very much indeed, Sachin. It's such an important thing, isn't it? A few hundred years ago, the insurance industry came up with some law around the movement of goods around the world. So you got this kind of concept of, commercial law, which came actually out of insurance. Is the item on the ship? If the crane drops the item and the item is over the ship, was it on land or was it on the ship? And there's lots of case law around all of this stuff. So lots of clever people wrote it down and figured it all out. And now that we're moving data as a valuable commodity across borders and across domains and across industries and countries and so on, then perhaps legislation does need to catch up a little bit and think about that for a moment and come up with that kind of legal framework as well internationally, as was trade in the probably from around about the 18th century onwards. Jasbir, your thoughts on examples of roles, responsibilities, and jobs and so on?
I was going to say for data jobs, since we became such a data world, take any job and just add data in front of it. So you used to have an analyst, now it's a data analyst, scientist, data scientist, engineer, data engineer, right? So it's pretty much every job that existed before can have data added to it. And from the skill set, definitely the technical proficiencies, knowing technology, having a good grasp of it. Python, R are great languages to understand. But then we look at the humanistic aspect, because being able to do that is only one side of the story. But then you have to bring it into the business side. So have to have good communication, know what problem you're solving, and being able to tell a story. With data, I find that's been one of the greatest challenges. Is a lot of times people are delivering data, and who you're delivering it to, they don't understand what's the why. So if you're able to tell a story around it and really make that connection, it really closes that gap, and that's where you can start to really use it in a way that's going to benefit everyone. And then I think for anyone that's looking to go into a data job, let's call it, make sure that you love to learn, because continuous learning, you go to sleep today, tomorrow something's changed. So it's an ever evolving field, and it's not something that you're going to take a course today and you're good for the next 20 years. It's going to be always taking new courses and learning what's happening on the tech side as well as on the business side.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Just one thought for colleagues and also for Simon to have a look at is there's a really comprehensive framework called Skills for the Information Age. It's actually quite a mature framework. It's been around for a very long time now. But it really is worthwhile having a look at, okay? Because this gives you a breakdown of roles, responsibilities, levels of maturity almost as well, or complexity. I might not be using the correct adverb there, for different jobs ultimately, okay, who are connected with this sort of area of work. So do have a little look at that. We've also got some suggestions for everybody who's online today that wants to find out more coming up. So we've got a very exciting event running actually next week that I think that you would all be interested in. So we'll talk about that momentarily. If we're super quick, panel, we can fit in a final question. So Shanice, let's go to that next, please.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. We've got a live question from Aaron Singh. What are the most critical components of big data?
All right, some critical components. Folks, have a little think when you're considering this to help Aaron out. I would say one of the most critical things, Aaron, is to be able to allow yourself, if I can, I'm going to expand the question a little bit, allow yourself time to discover the true value in the big data that you're collecting. Okay. On day one, hour one of day one, week one, month one, year one, the value may be relatively modest, but I can assure you, move forward 100 days or 1,000 days or 10,000 days, and actually you may find that the value has trebled. Rather like making a good investment over time, it really does work for you. Sachin, your thoughts on critical components of big data?
Yeah, so just quite quickly, firstly, identify the problems that you're trying to solve, and then also do a data stock take. So what type of data do you have in your organization, and not only in your organization, but which you share, for example, with your delivery partners and extended enterprise, and things such as master-slave relationships, things such as configuring user access permissions, ETLs, and then also configuring benchmark groups and threshold settings, and then training and retraining your machine models. Those are kind of like the things which you can consider when you're starting your data journey.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mart, final thoughts?
Very quickly, just like Jasbir said earlier, put data in front of it, have a data architecture, and have a data strategy.
Thank you very much indeed. No, it's very helpful. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Aaron, for your contribution today. Peter and all of the other people, Kath Combray and Charlotte, who've been online as well with us. And there are many others as well. Maiden was also online, wasn't he? So it's great to be able to see. Very good. So let's get our closing thoughts on today's event. Jasbir, if I may, I'll come to you first, and then we'll go to Mart.
I'm sure. Thank you so much. It was great to be here with everyone. And for closing remarks, 2 points. The first point I would make is I used to think we're living in such a data-driven world right now that everyone was making data decisions. In the boardroom, it's still gut decisions that are being made over data decisions. So keep that in mind. And the second one I would say is working in my past jobs. A lot of individuals used to always tell me, I'm not really a data person, right? I don't really like data. And the thing is with that is we're all data people. You probably didn't get it in the right way, right? So if you tell a story around it and if you deliver it differently, we love storytelling. Humans are storytellers. That's how we've created our culture. Data is just a part of it. So if you've told yourself, I'm not a data person, I would say this is the moment where now you start telling yourself, I am a data person. How do I go down that path? Thank you so much for today. This was awesome.
Absolutely fine. Thank you very much indeed. Need to add another thing to my list of things to do now, but I love that idea. And storytelling is such a powerful way to help other people understand, your thoughts as well. So we appreciate that. Mart, and then Jan-Willem.
Yes, thank you, APMG, and thank you everybody for watching. And thank you, fellow panelists. I think this is a very timely topic, very interesting. I want to say one thing what James, the governor, once said. Data matures like wine, applications like fish.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. It's a really good quote to finish on there. Thank you, Mart. Jan-Willem, your closing remarks. Where could we go next?
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks so much for having this. It was an absolutely great panel. I think everyone here is on the same page that big data is going to change the world as we know it sooner than later. And as Jasbir just said, it's better to get on board and become a data person very, very quickly. Now, on your second question as to where to go next, this is a very timely episode because next week we have the annual Big Data Days again. Did you know it's this year the 5th edition? So I have been running it for quite a while now. So if you've never heard about it, you can scan the QR code. We have 2 days, 9 to 5, 40 speakers ranging from Australia, the US, and every country in between. 800 registrations already. It's free. So if you don't, there's nothing you need as a participant. There's nothing you need to pay. So we have some of the brightest minds in the industry. So sign up. Don't miss this opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And I've attended those in the past. They are really good value. So I would definitely recommend them to people. You may not be able to attend all of the sessions. You may have meetings in between and so on. But I guess you can probably play catch up on the ones that you were not able to watch in real time, if that makes sense. So very good. And thank you, Jan-Willem, today. It's great to see you again. Jeroen, your closing remarks, please, and then we'll hear from Sachin.
Yeah, well, I like it also very much to be in the panel again and to hear everyone on those topics. The only thing I would like to have had also, well, what are the challenges for governments and regulatory bodies to go to that big data? Well, the only thing I have been able to do there, where they say, no, this is our way of working, we do it that way. But when you do it in a proper way, you show to them, then it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's really something we need to have.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, it's the sort of thing that, you don't know what good looks like until somebody's able to show you an alternative, to how you're working at the moment. And when they do, it can be that revelatory type moment, can't it? You think, oh, wow. Yeah, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your contribution today. Sachin, I know you've been crazy busy, so we're thrilled that you were able to join us for today. Your closing remarks, please.
Well, just keeping to the data principle that look after your data and your data will look after you. So within that, you have to cover things such as data governance and stewardship, and defining data quality, but also to make data fair, so the acronym FAIR, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So sometimes people should try to aim to share the data across the enterprise, even though they're not planning to share it, and therefore trying to build a data democracy. So if you adhere to those principles, you will eventually get there in your data journey.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. I love that phrase, build a data democracy. What a great idea. Thank you very much indeed. Shanice, it's been a fascinating insight today into the world of big data. Your reflections.
I am still, for my career, I've been working with data. I wouldn't say as an expert, but this episode has taught me so much. I can't wait to work with you all again to learn more from you. So thank you for sharing all your answers today.
Yeah, most definitely. It's always a school day when it's a Level Up day, and we all learn from each other all of the time. And on that note, I would like to thank, on behalf of all of our producers who were online today, the panel for your excellent questions. And also your excellent answers. Of course, the panel answered more than they asked. But still, nonetheless, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time so generously. And to everybody who's in the audience watching online, thank you so much for putting in the questions that really do drive the show. As you can see, it doesn't work without questions. So thank you so much for being really great. If you have particularly liked the answers that different people on the panel have given and you'd like to find out more, you may, of course, request a connection on LinkedIn to them. All of their links to their LinkedIn profiles are actually on the APMG International event page on our website. So do have a little look on there, and you can click a button and that will take you to the panelists' LinkedIn profile pages. All right, very good. Very well done. I'd like to say to you all, watch out for your name in the credits if your question was selected and put to the panel today. So do look out for that. Now then, over on our website, you may, of course, search for answers to more than 2,300 questions, which have previously been answered on Level Up episodes. And of course, all of the other podcasts and interviews and so on that APMG International does around the world. Don't forget that you may also listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Just search for APMG International, Level Up Your Career, and you'll find us super easily. Looking ahead, on Monday the 13th at 8 a.m. in the UK is the second in our popular series about how to facilitate like a pro. Now, if you're in sales or if you're in delivery, if you're in finance, if you're in marketing, wherever you are in the business, facilitation is a superpower, believe you me. So it's a must-attend event. It's always hugely popular when we talk about facilitation techniques, how to get out of a tricky situation, how to make a meeting come alive and really deliver value. That's the show for you. Monday morning, 8 a.m. UK time. Friday the 17th, we're going to continue our exploration in how to become a truly digital leader. That's at 2 p.m. UK. And on Monday the 20th, well, we're going to delve into how to become an agile change agent. Really great topic. So do join us for that. Don't forget, head over to the YouTube channel if you're there right now. Take a moment, give the video a like, please, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help others to discover our content. Just ask, and we will, of course, send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you too can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.